We're here today at Tingdean Marina in Norfolk, and we're going to be installing one of our 116 hand tilt zoom cameras and a 516 controller aboard this lovely SC42 Sea-Line here. Various stages to the job. We've got to sight the camera and sight the joystick. We've got to work out how we're going to get the cables from A to B, and then we're going to connect up. So what we'll do next is we'll take you through the tools that you're likely to want to use, likely to need to use when you're actually connecting all the kit together.
Equipment you're going to need for the installation. Start off with hand tools, with Allen keys to bolt the bracket up into position, various screwdrivers, wire cutters, and the scalpel there for the cable preparation and termination. I'm going to need a drill for when we open up the panel to put the 516 controller into. Digital voltmeter for checking your power voltage levels, and also for continuity checking if there's any issues. Got some spanners. We need to drop the A-frame, so we'll need spanners to do that. Wyman's tape there for getting the cable from A to B. The only real specialist equipment you probably need for this is the BNC crimp tool there. We can supply those, or you might be able to get them locally, might be easier, but they're easy to get hold of. We've got a deck gland there for when the cable comes out of the A-frame and goes into the radar arch. And lastly but not leastly, the Iris A-frame mounting bracket. Okay, so the 516 controller is going to be mounted at the helm. Now we all know that helm space is a real premium, so the first thing you've got to do is work out where you're going to put the units. On board this vessel really only got one option, and it's just here above the throttle. Obviously really important before you start drilling, making any cuts, is you've got to check behind the panel, make sure there's nothing underneath there, nothing's going to foul. And once you've done that, and once you're happy with that, the 516 comes with a drilling template. You can probably see on the camera there that this is covered in rain splashes because typical for British summertime, it's raining outside. So what I'm probably going to do here is I'm actually going to cut the template of the controller out, offer it up into position, and show you out. The drilling template's got the actual drill hole positions, and the red rectangle within the outline depicts the panel cutout that the controller is going to sit into. Hang on, we can do that camera now. So as you can see here, we've marked out the panel cutout, and we've marked out the 4 fixing screw positions. You'll see in the corner, each corner of the panel cutout, we've made a small hole, and what we're going to do is we're going to use those holes to open up the cutout. Right, now the rain has finally stopped and the sun's coming out, we're going to finally get around to bolting the camera up onto the A-frame. Camera we see here is fitted onto the fixing plate. What we'll do is we'll feed the cable through the A-frame, we'll offer the plate up, and then we'll fix into position with these U-brackets. Okay, so before we go ahead and bolt everything up into place, we've got to make sure we've got all the camera settings correct. By camera settings I mean the camera address and the video orientation of the camera. When we build the cameras we set them as standard in the desktop orientation. This particular install the camera's going to be hanging, so we need to make sure that we flip the video, and we do that by taking off this little panel here. Inside the panel you see 2 rows of dip switches. The bottom row is bank 1, and you may not be able to see here, but switch number 8 on the bottom row will be set to on in order to invert the video image so it's in the hanging position. The other dip switch is bank 2, and that purely handles the camera's addresses. You can address the camera from 1 up to 255, and in this case it's going to be camera 1, so switch 1 on bank 2 is set to 1. There is a separate dedicated video tutorial on the Iris YouTube account which goes into a little bit more detail on how to set the dip switches and what each dip switch does. Cool. Right, so we now have the hole cut for the 516 controller, and we've got the cable in position ready to be terminated. We've got the camera bolted up to the A-frame, and the umbilical cable from the camera run through the A-frame into the radar arch, and here it is, as you can see. Now obviously in order to get the umbilical down through the A-frame we've had to cut off the circular multi-pole connector that's on the end of the umbilical. Probably find that you might have to do that quite often in order to get the cable through really tight spaces. So now what we've got to do is join up these wires with the extension cable. And on this particular install, this is running down into the engine room where the fuse panel is, and at that point what we're going to do is we're going to splice the power in to a appropriately rated fuse, and then we're going to connect up the video signal and the data wires to the other extension cable which is running up from the engine room to the 516 position. So what I'll do is I'll run through the colours of the wires here so you know exactly which wire needs to connect to which. Again, all this information is in the user guide for the camera. So if we look at the umbilical coming down from the camera, we've taken off the multi-pole connector, and the video core's obvious. It's a mini coax core and the braid. So that's the video and the video ground. Then you've got this white and green pair here. The green is the DC ground and the white is the 12 volt supply. And then you have the purple and black, they're your data wires, your RS485 serial data, and the black is the RS485 ground, and the purple is the RS485 positive. You've got a yellow core as well, but that's just a spare, you don't need to connect that through. So these need to connect to the corresponding wires on the extension cable. In this case we've used Iris Combi PTZ cable. When you pull back the outer insulation, it's quite self-explanatory which wires are which. You have a RG59 coaxial cable for the video here, and what we'll do is we'll strip this back, and you'll have your video ground and your video signal inside this cable. You've then got your red and black cores for your DC supply, and then you've got another cable for your data. They're coloured yellow and orange. Now there's no convention as to what colours you use for your data. Obviously the thing to be completely aware of is that you just maintain consistency of those colours. So for example, if I connect my purple up to my yellow and my black up to my orange, then I've got to make sure I keep that the same at the controller end. So I'll just do that now, and then when we've done that, we shall go into the engine room and connect up the other cables. Okay, so we prepared both ends of the extension cable and the camera umbilical. Just going to put a BNC through adapter and connect up.
Originally I was going to just go for a Raymarine one.
And just click everything together. And then we go. Now we can tie that in, stow that out of the way. And all we've got to do now is connect this up in the engine room and then finally connect up behind the helm. Okay, so we're pretty much there with installation now. The next stage before we carry out the final phase, which is to connect the power up in the engine room, is to connect the cables up at the helm. Now we run the multi-core cable up to the back of the helm, and as you remember from the previous phase, we have the video cable, the 2 cores for the power, and the pair of wires for the data connections. Now your video cable is going to go into your monitor source, which in this case is the Raymarine multifunctional display. The power is used to power up the controller, and the data is used to control the camera from the controller. We'll take a quick look at the wires coming off of the controller. They're colour coded red and black for your DC supply. Red is obviously DC positive, black is your DC ground, and then you've got white and green for the ground. Green is your RS485 plus and white is your RS485 negative. So just remembering what we did in the last phase, on the data cable we're going to use the yellow core for the RS485 plus and the orange core for the RS485 negative. So I'll just connect these in now, put the controller into position, and then we'll be ready to finally power the unit down in the engine room. Okay, so we're at the business end now. We've got the camera installed, and from the camera we've got our combination cable running down here into the engine room, and at the helm we've got the 516 controller installed, and again we've got a combination cable running down here into the engine room. And what we're going to do is we're going to link the video from the camera into the combination cable that goes to the helm, and that's where we've terminated into the Raymarine. Do the same with the data cable, which will terminate into the back of the 516. And then that just leaves the power. So what I've done here, you can see, is I've fed the DC lines from the controller and the camera into the fuse board. If I just get behind here, you'll be able to see that we've got there's the video cables. So I've just got to connect them up, and that takes the video from the camera to the helm. And then finally, exactly the same with the data, just join those up, matching the colours. As we saw before, the colours in the data wire are yellow and orange. Yellow is RS485A, orange is RS485B. So once I've connected those up, we can power up. We're going to install a 5 amp fuse for this install. And once that's done, everything should be ready to roll.
Really basically a 3 hours to get to, and there's an unlimited stretch of water called Royd, I can't see the figures. I was on an expert, we ran it around on there. We ran it straight.
Now finished, power's connected up, the video is patched through from the camera through to the Raymarine, the data's patched through from the camera through to the Iris 516. All powered up, everything's working fine, and finally the sun's shining, which makes a nice change. Operation of the camera is really simple. You've got this tiny waterproof joystick here. It's 2 axes, so up, down, left and right. And then when you want to zoom it in, you've got your menu commands here, and the zoom commands are on the home page of the menu. Let's just go all the way in there. Just give you an idea of the power of the zoom on the on the 116 camera. So what we do now, when everything's up and running, is we just set up a few things for the client. Probably the most important thing to set up before we leave is the home position. If we look into the bottom left hand corner of the screen, you see the positional indicator. Now although I've got the camera pointing towards the bow there, as you can see I'm panning the camera, you can see the positional indicator moving around. So I've got the camera pointing towards the bow, but because the way the camera's installed, the indicator's showing that the camera's pointing backwards. So what we need to do is recalibrate that. And we do that very, very simply. On the 516, everything on the 516 is menu driven. So you've got your what we call feature buttons, and those buttons will activate whatever feature is listed in the current menu position. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the menu key. I'm going to go to the set button, and then I'm going to go to the cam button. And before I actually reset the home position, I'm going to make sure that the 516 controller learns that this is a 116 camera we're talking to. So I'll select 116, and that's done now. So that will exit me straight back out to the home screen. So if I go back into the menu, into the set button, and then if I go into the home button, that's now set that as the home position.